Well, thank you. I'm always the shortest guy at these things. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Very, very glad to be here. At first I thought the Fargo Air Museum, what an odd place to have an event. Now, I withdraw that statement. This is the most awesome place for an event I've ever been to. Incredible. I've been all over the country talking about this subject, and this is the second time I've had a chance to come to North Dakota, my first trip to Fargo, and so glad to be here. In fact, I was in the process of making my connecting flight here to Fargo. I was at the Denver airport, and suddenly somebody yells out, "Tom!" I turn my head. It's Barry Goldwater Jr. And I thought, man, what an interesting turn my life has taken, that Barry Goldwater is calling to me in an airport. And so I went over to him just in awe, and I said, "Barry Goldwater Jr." And immediately everybody looks at him like, oh my gosh, it is Barry Goldwater. I mean, he looks exactly like his father. Now, the poor guy, he's a wonderful man in his own right, and he had a distinguished congressional career in his own right, so we don't want the poor guy living in his father's shadow all the time. However, I am tempted to go up to him and say, look, I got these thick, black-rimmed glasses. Just put them on. I just got to see what this would look like. But he's a very good sport about this. It's very kind of him to say that he is honored to be in my presence, when, of course, it's just the opposite. I'm honored to be in the presence of a man like him. Before coming up here tonight over dinner, I had a couple of glasses of wine. You may think that's not particularly newsworthy. However, you're neglecting the fact that I have the alcohol tolerance level of a 90-year-old woman. So who knows? Who knows what we're in for tonight? Figured might as well make it interesting. I've already been to North Dakota. I got to do something a little bit more interesting for the second time, so who knows what's going to happen. What I want to talk about tonight is some topics related to this book of mine, Nullification. And I've got a bit of an uphill battle ahead of me, perhaps not with you folks in this room, but I'm going to be taking some unpopular positions, but yet arguing for them vigorously. And I hope people who agree with me and disagree with me will be listening in, because we need to be having this conversation as civilized adults here in the United States facing intractable problems. The problem that we're facing right now primarily is that government just seems to grow and grow and grow no matter what happens, no matter who's in office. Maybe it grows more slowly, maybe it grows more quickly, but it just grows. And we all know that. And as we go through the motions of opposing it, we sort of go through these motions with a sense of dreary inevitability, that no matter what we do, the thing is just going to keep on growing. So I want to look at that in light of the 10th Amendment, and the Constitution, and liberty in general, what we can do about this. What I can't do tonight is persuade you that the federal government is out of control. I take for granted that people in this room get that it's sort of obvious. I don't have time to go into that. I assume you get that. We have a government that is completely contemptuous of the very idea of constitutional limits on its authority. As far as they're concerned, the Constitution exists to make sure we have a presidential election every 4 years, so we can choose between two plastic men every 4 years. That's why it's there. And it's there to make sure that the senators serve 6-year terms and so on and so forth. But we should remember that the British Constitution, which has been around a long time, is an unwritten document. And they have all those things. They've spelled out what offices have what year terms and so on and so forth. You don't need a written constitution for that. What you need a written constitution for is the limitation of government. That's the only reason to have a constitution, not for these structural things. You can have that as a matter of tradition, unwritten. We have a written constitution for the purpose of limiting government. And yet, it's going to be a long night. Because I got much better zingers than that one in store for you guys. But we all know now, I mean, it's sort of too easy, right? I mean, you know, to throw out Nancy Pelosi's name, it's almost too easy, right? It's like an easy, you know, boo line or applause line or whatever. But when Nancy Pelosi was asked, you know, look, I'm just curious. I just want to know, where in the Constitution do you get the authority to pass this health care bill? I mean, I just want to know, right? I mean, it seems like as a citizen, I'm entitled to ask that question. And her response was to laugh and ask the questioner twice, are you serious? And then move on to the next question. So notice, Her Imperial Majesty thinks that she can get away with not, I mean, I would have understood even if she had given like a dumb answer or a really lame answer or an easily refuted answer or anything like that. She gives no answer whatsoever. And it feels, in fact, feels put out by the question. Well, that indicates something's wrong. I don't care where you are in the political spectrum. That should indicate to you that something is wrong. The Constitution doesn't just belong to the people in this room. It belongs to every American. Every American should want to know, why is that simple question treated with such contempt? When it's a question that Thomas Jefferson and so many people we admire in American history would have asked as a matter of course. Now, we get told an awful lot that people like us are unreasonable. We want to stick to the strict letter of the Constitution. Don't we know that this is a living, breathing Constitution that changes with the times, man? All right, let's go into that before we get any further. Let's go into this living, breathing Constitution thing. I was on the radio the other day, and one of the people on the radio said to me, you know, a friend of mine said the other day that if you, the radio host, had been in charge, you with your strict construction of the Constitution, why, women would never have had the vote, they were told, the person was told. Well, how do women get the vote? Through a constitutional amendment. Nobody objects to the idea of constitutional amendments, given that the idea of constitutional amendments happens to be in the Constitution. How could you support the Constitution and not support that mechanism when it happens to be in there? We're not objecting to constitutional amendments when we object to a living, breathing Constitution. What are we objecting to? We're objecting to the idea that, hey, we'd like to do X, Y, or Z, but you know what? It's not in the Constitution. But, you know, gosh, it'd be a real pain to put it in the Constitution, so let's just go ahead and do it anyway. That's what we're objecting to. That is the problem. I mean, imagine somebody in the middle of a poker game saying, now, wait a minute, my two pair beats your full house because I've decided this is a living, breathing poker game that changes with the times. Who would accept that? This is an absurdity. Amendments are fine. The problem comes when, as Jefferson said, you turn the Constitution into a blank piece of paper. You allow it to, you pretend that it authorizes practically everything. Well, then what was the point of having it? Why did we go to all the trouble of drafting it? And let's also remember that Americans fought a war against a living, breathing Constitution. That was the War for Independence. What kind of Constitution did the British have? Did they have a written document, a single written document we could all refer to? No. They had an unwritten Constitution that consisted of custom and tradition. The trouble with it was that what was protected one day was attacked the next day. It was very hard for Americans to have their liberties protected under a regime like that. And so we fought against that, and we're determined to establish a written Constitution so that from now on we could say, now wait a minute, the government does not have this power, and I don't care that today is September 26th and yesterday was September 25th. That doesn't matter. The Constitution remains the same, and it's written down, it's in black and white, so you can refer to it. That was what we wanted as Americans. We were fighting against a Constitution that constantly changed with the times. It changed with the times according to the needs of the government at the time. What we're fighting against when we say we're fighting against a living, breathing Constitution is the idea that judges will simply decide on a day-to-day basis what the Constitution means this week as opposed to last week. That a bunch of unelected, politically well-connected lawyers, which is really all these people are. I mean, forget the superstitious reverence we're supposed to show for them. Waving incense in front of them and bowing down. They're just politically well-connected lawyers. These people are supposed to have a monopoly on telling us what the Constitution means today as opposed to yesterday, regardless of what the text means? No. Jefferson said the Constitution was written in simple English so the average American could understand what it means without being told by some black-robed deity what it means. Now, it does not help that we were all taught in 7th grade that don't worry about what the federal government is doing. All of it's allowed in the Constitution. Because we've got an elastic clause, so-called, the necessary and proper clause. We've got a general welfare clause. We've got a commerce clause. Well, those things I'm not going to talk about tonight, although Chapter 2 of my book, Nullification, gives you the idea of what these things really were supposed to mean. It's not that hard to figure out.